I think that many of us, especially white people, we are privileged. We are in ways that many of us do not think about on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of us go through life with our blinders on. And I think that in the past decade, because I think Black Lives Matters was founded in 2014. So about the past decade, there has been a rise of awareness coming around with police violence and police brutality. So with Nick, over the course of the three books, he goes from being a person going through life with blinders on, thinking that people like his father and people like him can do no wrong because he's grown up with his father as a cop. He's a cop's son. That's what his whole life has been. And then through the series, we start seeing Nick begin to question that. And it is with the help of his friends, but it also is Nick actually thinking critically, perhaps for the first time in his life. And that was very important for me because I wanted to show that even young people, especially, can think critically about these things, even if they are a disaster twink like Nick is, because he is chaos personified. His ADHD, he has all the superpower stuff happening around him. But at the same time, he still takes time to listen to the people in his community, to listen to Gibby, to listen to her parents, to listen to what other people think, what his father does. And then him and his father then go on a journey together where they may be moving a bit independently of each other, but their arcs are similar in that they're realizing that they may be doing more harm than good. And I think that's a very important moment for both the character of Nick and Aaron Bell, his father, to realize I'm part of the problem. I have been living life with blinders on, thinking that things were black and white and not even remotely considering the shades of gray in this book. So that's why the course of the novel happened as it did, where Nick starts being, I don't want to say pro cop, but Nick is pro dad. He is very pro his father. And then he starts to think critically and says, okay, I can love my dad and I respect the hell out of him, but I can also be critical about what he does, who he's harmed, who he's hurt, who his colleagues have harmed and hurt. And maybe I can start thinking differently, and maybe I can start to help to make a change. Because as it is within the House on the Stroll, you'd see as it is with these books, change starts with the voices of the few. It really does. But we also have to make sure that as we're lifting up those voices, that we're not drowning them out trying to help them. Sometimes the best thing to do is to shut up and listen. I think that many people my age or older underestimate teenagers. When you hear right-wing politicians complaining and posting on Twitter that we should raise the voting age to 21 because of how the last election went, you know that they're scared of children. They are scared of kids thinking for themselves. They're scared of kids being upset at losing their friends in violence because they know that these kids will not forget. They will not forget who helped them, and they will not forget who actively fought against them. It's kind of like coming out in a way. That first moment you come out to that first person, or even any other person for the rest of your life, but especially as a kid, when you come out to that first person, you will remember what they say for the rest of your life, be it good, be it bad, be it a middling reception. Every word, every facial expression, you will remember for the rest of your life. It will be seared into your brain. And people still think that kids don't know what they're talking about. People still think that kids aren't educated enough on big issues. That is ridiculous. Children, young people, they are the future. One day very soon, all these boomer politicians are going to die. All the boomer generation will be gone. And it is going to be left to the younger generations to make the world how it should have been and not how it's been for very long. So that's why I wrote children into these big real world situations, because we often underestimate what young people are capable of. And I think that's going to be to our detriment. Queer kids with ADHD never get to be the front of their own story. They never get to be the hero. They never get to be anything. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we see ADHD written as something to be cured. And a kid with ADHD turns into a teenager with ADHD who turns into an adult with ADHD. That's just how it works. And I would not want to be cured. If I was a kid again, say 13, 14 years old, like Nick is at the beginning of the first book, he's 16, he doesn't like his ADHD. I didn't either. But I learned to accept it. I learned to have it be part of myself because it is part of me, like my queerness. It does not define me, but it is part of me. And I wanted to show that with a character like Nick. And I am a big comic book nerd. I love comics. I have since I was a kid. So I wanted to just combine those things to show the story of what it would look like if a sidekick kind of a character got his own book. So I wanted that for Nick. I wanted to explore that in that world. But I also wanted to combine it with something that I think is lovely, and that is fan fiction. I got my start as a 6-year-old. My first things that I wrote were fan fiction based upon the video game series Metroid. In the Metroid game, it's a big aliens. You have a gun for your arm. You're a space marine. At the very end of the first game, the main character takes off their helmet for the first time and is revealed to be a woman. You've been playing as a woman the whole time. And that just blew my mind. I was like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. So I started writing stories about me and this character going on adventures together. If you've read the Extraordinary series, you know that there are sections of fan fiction in these books that Nick writes. Large portions of that is actually from my own fan fiction as a kid. I still have those notebooks. So whenever you see lines like Pyrostorm growling seductively and stuff like that, that was actually repurposed X-Files fan fiction that I wrote when I was like 13, 14 years old. And instead of Pyrostorm growling seductively, it would have been Agent Mulder growling seductively. So I just lifted wholesale from my own fan fiction that I wrote around Nick's age to put it in the book because I didn't want to make fun of people who write fan fiction. I didn't want to make it seem like I was coming down on them. I wanted to write how a 15, 16-year-old would have written. So I took my own works that I wrote at that age and just put them in the book because fan fiction is, I think it's delightful. I think it's wonderful. Fan fiction gives burgeoning writers a way to hone their voice, to find what works for them as writers. But it also gives queer people a space to create their own stories when they don't get to see themselves in canon. The idea that the literati looks down on fan fiction is just the most bullshit thing I've ever seen. You have people, especially young people, writing 200,000 word epics and posting them online for free because they love their fandom. And I just think that's remarkable. I think that's something to be celebrated. I have a very strict rule that people are allowed to do any kind of fan work they want on my books. They can do whatever they want. Because I've heard of authors that, for example, the late Anne Rice was very anti-fandom. She was very anti-fan fiction on her works, and she didn't even like art being done. And she threatened to sue people who wrote fan fiction based upon her work. And I just, may she rest in peace, but I think that's the dumbest thing in the world. I love when creativity inspires creativity. That being said, I do not read fan fiction based upon my work. I've always been very vocal about that. People send me fan fiction a lot, but I always will reply back. I don't read fan fiction of my work for a very specific reason. I know my story and how I wrote it. This is your story and how you wanted to do it. I don't want your story to get into my brain and have it potentially become my story. That's just not how I want it to work. So I try to keep that separate. But fan art, I will love that until the day I die, man. Anytime I see a piece of fan art that I get tagged in or get sent to me, it feels like the very first time. It's stunning to me and frankly, rather ludicrous that somebody would love something so much that I did that they'd want to make something from it. And the talent that some people have or that many people have is just ridiculous. And what I love the most about fan art, though, is how every creator has their own different interpretation of the characters and how they look and how they exist. And every one of them is right because that's how they see the characters. And I think that's remarkable. I'm in the Star Wars fandom. I love Star Wars, man. Star Wars is like my jam. When I was writing The Extraordinaries, I actually because a lot of my research was, and you've probably, if you've read The Extraordinaries, you see how it's laid out, just like AO3, Archive of Our Own, because I think that's the best fan fiction site out there. So when I was researching Archive of Our Own and reading other people's fan fiction, I said, I'll write a fan fiction and I'll post it on Archive of Our Own. So I did. I wrote a Star Wars Poe and Finn relationship. It's a one shot. It's like a little more than 10,000 words. And it did really well. It got like thousands of kudos. And still nobody knows it was me. I didn't put any indication that it's on there. And it's the only time I've ever posted on Archive of Our Own. People can find it. I've talked about this before, and I've had people send me archive links. Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? Nope, nobody's found it yet. They should have been gay to begin with. I think that about all straight characters. Wouldn't these show be better if these were queer characters? Like, okay, like I was recently rewatching, it was on, I don't even know, randomly, it was just on Friends, the 90s sitcom. And I remember growing up, that was, everybody loved that show, and everybody is still extraordinarily popular, but it is the straightest, whitest show ever made. It is ridiculous how straight and white it is. And so, no, I have no problem whatsoever when anybody goes in and takes canon and queers it. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because you know what? It's better. It's better that way. There should be more, there should be queer people in everything. Everything. We don't need straight actors anymore, do we? No.